right, guys, welcome back once again. We got one more session, and then you can successfully say you've done one half of the 2022 Social Media Forum. Hopefully you're getting a lot of good information about this. I know I am. Again, happy you guys could attend. For our last session, we're going to talk analytics and data analysis. I'm going to introduce you to Mr. Amin Ibrahim.
Thank you so much, Kwande. Hi, everybody. My name is Amin Ibrahim. I'm the Senior Director of Pre-Sales and Training over at Hootsuite. I am hailing from Vancouver, BC, Canada. And fun fact, I don't know if y'all can see it right now, but that bookshelf back there, about half of that is military history. I got tons of respect for everything that y'all do every day, and I feel very privileged and honored to be here. So what are we going to be talking about today? Today we're going to be talking about social media analytics and data analysis and how that can relate to our day-to-day and how we can prove out the value of what it is we're doing and make sure that we're measuring the right things so that we can achieve our missions that are out there and our goals that are out there. So yeah, myself, Amin, again, pleasure to be here. Feel honored and privileged. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about why analytics matter. We're going to talk about what are some of those different things that we might want to measure, because there's a lot of stuff we can measure out there. We want to make sure we only measure the stuff that's most important. We're going to talk a little bit about how we want to measure that, whether we're using a tool, a social relationship platform to measure it, or whether we're doing it natively. We're going to talk about why we want to measure those things and how we can prove that it's pointing us towards our mission and helping us be successful. And then we're going to also talk about how we can measure some of the impact of the things that we're doing, how we can quantify the impact of some of the things that we can doing, so that we could show the people around us and our bosses and our stakeholders what it is we're doing and the impact that is. So first off, why do analytics matter? So interestingly enough, and this will be no surprise to all of y'all, but 78% of government leaders see social media as a strategic area of focus. And as we know, I mean, we got half of adults who get their news from social media before any other venue. We've got, in a lot of areas of the world, we've got people spending more times on social than they spend watching TV. So it's no surprise that it's a strategic area of focus because it has become such a huge, huge channel for how we as human beings communicate with one another. So as a result, 78% of government leaders see social media as that strategic area of focus. Now, this one's really fascinating in that about 9 out of 10 government agencies say that social media is even more important over the course of the last year. I would actually wager that the 10% who say it isn't more important say that because they don't think it can get any more important. It's become such an important channel for us to reach people out there, to reach people we might be trying to recruit, to reach people we might be trying to influence, to share news of what our agencies and our departments are doing. It's huge. It's huge for us. And finally, 61% of government agencies say that misinformation and rumor control is such a key task of social media at their agency. And I'm sure there are a lot of you today who have this as one of the main objectives of why it is we're sharing this information. It is so powerful for us to win that information battlefield. It is so important for us to make sure that people cannot come at us asymmetrically, and that rumor control and misinformation is so important and such a huge part of social. Now, why do these three stats matter, right? So 78% of government leaders see it as a strategic area of focus, 89% of agencies think it's gotten even more important, and 61% of government agencies see that misinformation, rumor control is just such an important mission. So why does that matter for us here? Why does that matter through the context of business analytics? And so it matters because the analytics that we're going to be able to get are going to help us achieve these goals that our leaders have and that our departments and agencies have, because it is such a enabler for the things that we want to do. Now, why do I say this? So if we think about from the scientific world, the purpose of measurement in the scientific world, when they're doing tests, when they're doing studies, is to test out hypotheses. We can tinker with a lot of things. We can do a lot of things based on gut feel, but in order to make sure that we're getting the right outcomes, we're fighting that misinformation in the right way, we're recruiting who we want to recruit, we're getting our story out there, and making sure that the enemy story that is incorrect is not getting out there. We need to make sure that we're testing the right hypotheses out. What type of content resonates better here? Will this initiative work? Will this initiative not work? So data is key to be able to test out hypotheses in an effective way so that we go beyond gut feeling and so that we can make sure that we're doing the right initiatives and not wasting time on the initiatives that are not working. Data is really important because it helps us make the best decisions. Now we've all heard the term losing the forest for the trees, right? And sometimes we can have some great high-level information, and sometimes we can have some great detailed information. And in order to make the best decisions, we've got to have strong linkages between the forest and the trees so that we're making the right decisions. They're not ivory tower decisions that aren't grounded in reality, and they're not myopic tactical decisions that lose the bigger picture. And having good data helps us make sure that we have that linkage between the high-level forest and the tactical trees to make sure that we can be on the right track and that the strategic layer and that the tactical layer are linked. And finally, data helps us prove the impact of what it is we're doing. In this day and age, as you all know, resources are scarce, resources are limited, and unless we can prove that what we're doing is working well, it can be harder for us to get more of that resource and to be able to fully achieve our mission and achieve our objectives. And so data is such a great way for us to test hypotheses, to make the best decisions, and to prove impact so that we can achieve those high-level goals, because we all know how important social media is for our leaders, and we all know how important it is in fighting that misinformation and that rumor control, which is just becoming endemic in today's world. So hopefully that gives you all an idea of some of the thinking and philosophy behind how we're going to be presenting a lot of the information in this session. And with that, let's get on to the next bit where we talk about what to measure, because there's a lot we can measure in social media. There's so much we can measure in social media. And so if we think about why should we be tracking these metrics, right? So tracking these metrics are going to help us make sure that we understand our audience, and it'll make sure that the content that we're putting out is resonating, it's landing with them. And so some of the things that we can measure how far our content is going. We can measure how people what do they do with it when they see our content? Is it important enough for them to share? Is it important enough for them to respond to? How are they seeing the relative weight of that content we're putting out? Is that content driving people to the areas that we want to go to? When we put out an amazing post on Instagram, is that driving people towards our recruiting page, for example? Is that helping us enlist more people so that we can fill our ranks? And then finally, is it helping people actually convert and do what it is that we want them to do, whether it's downloading information, whether it's filling out forms, whatever that is, we want to make sure we're tracking that. By collecting this information, we understand what our audience wants to see, and we can give them more of that so that they can hear the messages that we're putting out and the stories that we're putting out. So there are a lot of social media analytics out there. There's a ton, and there's a lot that we can measure, and we don't necessarily need to focus on all of that. We'll be getting into that a little bit later when we talk about how we look at a few models of how we might want to be measuring this information. But fundamentally, these are the most common types of metrics. We tend to call them vanity metrics, but likes, shares, comments, retweets, reach, engagement rate, followers. Really easy metrics for us to get. They give us a good idea of how our content is resonating with people. So for example, if I'm Central Command and we've got some amazing footage of Eager Lion that's going on right now in Jordan. We got 30 countries participating in that training exercise. How is that resonating with the people that we're sending it out to? Are they engaging with that content? Are they sharing it out? Are there tweaks that we need to make? It's such a great way for us to find out how it's working. So these are the common ones. So to define some of these, and I know for some of y'all this is going to be social media 101, but for some of the others, I think it's really useful for us to define all these different metrics. So impressions, right? How many times was the post that you sent out and created, how many times has it shown to people? The reach, how many unique accounts have actually seen your post? How many people has it been, saw it on their friend's profile or their friend's profile or whichever? How much reach is it getting? Engagements is how do people interact with the stuff that you're putting out? Do they like it? Are they commenting? Are they sharing it to their friends? That's a great way to find out how important it is. In general, the more engaged people are, the more impact those posts have. From there, are we driving people towards website clicks? Are we asking them to convert somewhere? And then finally, there's the engagement rate, which is number of engagements and divided by impressions. So for all the impressions that you have, how often do people engage on that? That's a great metric for us to have. So we talk about some of the things to measure. Now, how do we actually want to measure these things? So there's a few different ways that we can do it. So some of y'all will have access to Hootsuite or another SRP. We're super proud to be working with y'all at DINFOS. We're super proud to be working with Marine Corps Recruiting Command, Central Command, CBP, Coast Guard, FEMA, FBI, all amazing departments doing amazing work within the government. We're really proud to be working with y'all. And so if y'all have access to it, some of those great analytics you can get right within the dashboard. You click on the button if you have access to it. It'll give you that information. And if you don't already have access to it, there might be some SRPs out there that do some free offerings that you can have. I know we have one here at Hootsuite. But if you have an SRP, you want to find data analytics, pretty straightforward. You go into your analytics area and you can pull in those metrics. So you can start to collect the metrics that you need to collect. I'll be showing y'all once we collect it what we actually do with it as we get into the why section. But for now, this is how we can collect it. Now, if you don't have access to an SRP, it is still, and again, some more examples of what you can do within Hootsuite, right? So, or another SRP, you can take a look at what it is. You can look at trends. You can see how your audience is doing, who is paying attention to my information. Am I fighting misinformation at home? Am I fighting misinformation in other parts of the globe? It's just a great way for us to be able to see that. And if you don't have access to an SRP, we can get a lot of this stuff straight from the social media networks. So you can see, for example, on Twitter, how are analytics there where you can see how your individual posts are doing, how your account is doing, how is it trending? Is the stuff that I'm doing resonating with people? Are people, the recruiting messages that I'm putting out there, the enlistment messages that I'm putting out there, are people responding to that? Are they going to our recruiters the way we want them to go? It's a great way for us to find that out. Now, it's such a great way for us to look at not just the individual post level metrics. How did this one tweet do? How did this one Facebook message or post do? But what is my overall profile looking like? Are people coming to my page, my department and agency's page, to quash rumors and make sure they're getting the right information? Or are we not getting much traction out there? Those are great questions to answer, and the analytics that you get from the social networks can really help with that. Same thing with Facebook. Great way to get some insights on how your page is doing. Great way to know how your individual posts are doing, because we talk a lot about, one of the reasons is test hypotheses. And you might have a hypothesis that video content does better with this audience, or images do better with that audience. Or for training exercises, pictures are awesome. For testimonials, videos are awesome. For this age range, that's awesome. It's just a great way for you to be able to find out what is resonating, and so that you can make sure that the content that you are putting out there is the most impactful. And then the demographic stuff, really useful. A lot of times when we're creating content, sometimes we can have a one-size-fits-all approach. By paying attention to the metrics around demographics, your audiences, what's resonating with different audiences, you can create a more targeted content strategy to make sure you're achieving the goals and objectives that your agency or department has set. LinkedIn, I don't know how active y'all are on LinkedIn, but if you are active on LinkedIn and you're finding it useful from a career perspective, then it's great to be able to get recruits coming in. It's great to be able to have people who might be interested in working for y'all's departments to see what y'all have on LinkedIn. And so it's just a great social network we can use there. So we talked about what to measure. We talked about how to measure. Now let's talk a little bit about why we want to measure those things and how we can put it through a model that it'll apply to the goals and objectives that we have. So there's a lot of different metrics that we can measure, and we know why we want to measure them. Now, we're going to need to create a measurement plan. There are too many different types of metrics that we can actually collect in social media. And so knowing which ones to really focus on becomes really important. And it's very hard to know which ones to focus on if you haven't built a measurement plan. So I'd actually encourage you all as part of your journey as you're creating goals and objectives for what your team is doing, what your department's doing, what your agency's doing, to create a measurement plan. And the first thing that you want to do when you're creating a measurement plan is, who is your target audience? Is my target audience potentially people that I want to recruit into my organization? Is my target audience the citizenry who needs to be kept up to date with information and make sure that we're quashing rumors and that we're getting the right information out to people? So knowing who your target audience is really, really important. Now, once we know who our target audience is, we need to know exactly how we can help our target audience. What is it that they need from us? Like, what are we trying to do as a department to help that target audience out? Are we trying to keep our target audience safe? Are we trying to offer our target audience an amazing career and a fulfilling mission in life for what it is they want to do? That's going to help determine what type of metrics we want to collect and how we want to build that model. Now, we think about our audience, so we know who they are. We know how we can help them. Where in that journey can we help them the most? Because that audience is going to have a long journey, and there's going to be some key customer journey points that we can jump in there and help our audience out. Now, we also need to know what activities support our agency's goals. Do we have recruiting goals? Do we have higher level goals where it's around making sure that the citizenry is well informed? Do we have goals around a specific mission in some of our global deployments? How can we make sure that the activities that we do are supporting the agency's goals? So we need to identify those goals. And then finally, how do we measure success? Which metrics are important for us to plot against these different areas? What are we going to track going forward? What are we going to benchmark against? And what are we going to see in terms of how we can say at the end of the day, yes, this is working, or no, this isn't. So a measurement plan is key to all of that. So what are some typical social media goals and objectives? So these are some typical goals and objectives that will apply to most of y'all's information, most of y'all's organizations. Obviously, there's going to be different nuances with the different agencies and different missions out there. But in general, we need to make sure that we are informing people, we're connecting with people, and that we're protecting people. And ways that we tend to typically see how we can inform people is having a strategy on how we get our content out there, whether it's organic social content or whether it's ads content, which could be quite powerful. How do we generate traffic to the areas we want to generate to? What websites do we want to send people to? What links do we want to send them to? And what conversions do we want them to do? Who do we want to make sure is, for example, downloading the right forms or seeing the right information? We want to make sure that we measure that. And then finally, we want to make sure that the public opinion is influenced and they are presented with the right information so that we can defeat some of those rumors out there. It's really hard these days to cut through a lot of the noise out there, and it's important for people to get information that is true and that is relevant to them, and we need to make sure that we're constantly informing them so that stays top of mind. We also want to make sure we're connecting with people. How can we set up systems so that we can have those great one-to-one relationships? When somebody has a question about recruitment, for example, when they're not sure if they want to join which branch of the services they want to join, they want to talk to somebody, how can we respond to them in the moment and give them some great advice? How do we help grow by A, getting more people into our organizations, but also B, by retaining them? How do we remind people that where they are today is a great place and that's where they want to be, and be extra proud there? And then we also want to make sure that by connecting with people, we're increasing that likelihood of people having positive sentiment. We're increasing that likelihood of people having a very favorable view of your department or your agency or your area or the government, for example, so that we can make sure that we're driving the outcomes that we're looking to. And finally, protect is a huge one. We want to fight misinformation actively. We don't want to be on the defensive when it comes to fighting misinformation. It is a very, very important thing in this day and age, whether it's misinformation from state actors or non-state actors. We want to make sure that we are always fighting that battle and we're winning that battle. We want to make sure that based on our different team sizes and how our different organizations are structured, that we've got our team coverage for crisis management sorted out. So as you all know, Crises happen every day, and when they do, we need to make sure we have a plan in place so that we can deal with it quickly and efficiently and drive the safe outcome. And finally, at the end of the day, due to the nature of what it is that you all do, it's all about keeping people safe, and we need to make sure they have the right information to do that, and that we can pull information from the right areas of different departments and different agencies to, again, keep people safe. So there's some examples of what typical social media goals and objectives are. These will change based on your individual day-to-day and your department and agencies or objectives and plans, but to give an idea of some of the ones that could be out there. So this is where we get into a framework for all this different measurement that we're doing. So there's so many things that we can measure. There's so many different metrics, whether they're vanity metrics, whether they're conversion metrics. How do we actually start to bring structure to this to make sure that our plans are working? And so this is the KPI framework that we use here at Hootsuite. And this applies for any organization out there. It applies for the defense establishment. It applies for businesses. It applies for nonprofits. It applies for anyone who uses social, because fundamentally, at the end of the day, some of the high-level priorities are similar. We want to make sure our audience is informed. We want to make sure we strengthen those relationships, and we want to make sure we're driving results. And so when we do that, we can start to really figure out what metrics we need. And so based on those priorities, so based on those 3 priorities, we can then start to have the different objectives within it. So for example, for informing your audience, you need to make sure that your audience is aware of what it is that you're putting out there, right? So I'm sending out this great post. I'm going to highlight this amazing success story of somebody who's enlisted, and they're a few years in now, and they're loving it. And they want to tell people about it. So we want more awareness of our organization. And so we'll send out that post, and we'll measure it, as you can see on the right here, by reach and impressions. So reach and impressions are a fantastic way to measure awareness. I'll give you an idea of how great you're doing at the very top of that funnel with awareness. Okay, cool. So people are now aware of this great post. Do they like it? Do they have any affinity towards it? Do they appreciate what it is we're sending out there? And so to measure the affinity, a great example would be, are people liking it? Are they leaving reactions? Are they now following your account? That is a great way to start to measure the affinity of the stuff that you're putting out. Now, once your audience is informed and you want to start to strengthen the relationship with your audience, how are they now consuming the stuff that you're putting out there? Are they viewing your photos and videos? Is it just falling on deaf ears? Are you creating a ton of content that nobody's consuming? It's a great way for us to be able to track that. And then from there, we can see, how do we move from consumption to conversation? Okay, cool. So they consumed it, but you know what? Now they're actually having conversations with you. They're sharing the stuff that you're putting out there. They're commenting on it. And so we can track that through there. Now, it's always fantastic for us to be able to inform people and strengthen those relationships. But at the end of the day, there are some very specific results that we tend to want to drive through this. And sometimes those results are intent, right? We are sending people towards different pages. I want people to check out this piece of information that is refuting some of these rumors that are out there. I want people to sign up for this, or I want people to look at this form. So we would go ahead and measure that intent based on how many people are clicking on the links that we have and whether they're going to the landing pages that we want them to. And then finally, are they converting? When we sent people to that link, for example, and they clicked on that website, did they then navigate through that website and ask for more information on enlistment? Did they go through that website, for example, for the Marine Corps Recruiting Command, and ask for more information on how they can become a recruiter themselves because they see that as being a great career path? And so this funnel helps us take the priorities that we have as an organization and then look at it through the lens of what are our social objectives. And then for each one of these 6 social objectives, what specifically do we need to measure to prove this out? And so what's really cool about this is once you've got this built out for what it is you're trying to do, you will quickly be able to identify areas you might want to lean into a little bit. So you might find that you're doing an awesome job on awareness and affinity. You're doing great on conversations, but at the end of the day, it's not leading to intent and it's not leading to conversion. So you're able to inform your audience, but it's not driving the results that you're looking for. Or maybe you're finding situations where you are driving results, but you're not actually reaching as many people as you'd like to, And so that set of results is more limited than it could be if you did a better job of informing your audience and having more awareness and more affinity. So it's just a really good way for us to find out what are some of the areas that we might want to lean into a bit to make sure that we're being successful and we're doing what it is we need to do. Now, I know I mentioned earlier that there's a ton of stuff we can measure, right? To give you an idea, and this isn't an exhausted list because I think within all the social networks, there are hundreds of different things we can measure. But even within these 6 buckets, there's a whole lot of different things that we can measure. So if we're focused on awareness, for example, that's what? 11 different things that we can measure, from total reach all the way down to number of posts published. Sorry, 10 things. Now, we don't necessarily need to measure each and every one of those, right? So within those 6 buckets, the plan here isn't that we build this model and then we measure 140 different metrics. Because as we all know, once we start measuring way too many things, we start getting lost in the data, and that's not necessarily the most useful. We want to pick the ones that are the most appropriate for these 6 buckets that we have so that it makes sense. We don't need to measure 40 different things for affinity. Let's pick the 3 or 5 most important and go with that. And that'll give us a plan of what we need to do as we go forward. So some key takeaways, right? As we build out that model, it's important that we keep an eye on our analytics. So actually make it a monthly habit to review your social analytics, at least every month. Weekly is great. Daily might be a bit too much, but it gives you a good idea so you don't get surprised. And based on the framework, it's so useful for us to look at that data holistically. If we only focus on likes or only focus on followers, we're completely missing the boat. We got to look at it in terms of that funnel model and think about what it is that matters. That's what's going to help us make the, as we talked about earlier, make the best decisions, right? We're linking the forest and the trees, we're linking the strategic layer and the tactical layer to make sure that we're driving the outcomes that we're looking for. And finally, the data that we get, it's got to go to something, right? It's got to drive our content plan, for example. It's got to let us know what's working and what's not. So we're not just collecting data for the sake of collecting data. We're collecting data for the sake of testing things out and making the best decisions and ensuring that we do more of what works really well, do less of what doesn't, and tweak accordingly so that we get the results that we're looking for as an organization and get the results that we're looking for as an agency. Now let's talk a little bit about impact. Now in this, we're going to be talking about we're going to talk about a few different models and a few different formulas of ways that we can potentially measure some of the impact of what it is that we're doing, which will be great. So different types of impact. Here are 3 examples. There are more, right? But in general, when we think about the impact that we have on social media, we can help us get more of something, right? More conversions, more recruits, more funding. It can help us get less of something, less cost, less risk, all that other fun stuff. But here's some 3 good examples. So workflow efficiency. So when we have a humming social media program, we've got the right tools in place and the right processes in place, then we can start to show a lot of great efficiency and it becomes a big force multiplier. What happens then is that fewer people can do the work of a much larger team and reach a whole lot of people out there, and it's a huge cost saver for us. So workflow efficiency is a huge one. Strategy optimization is really all about, knowledge is power, right? And you collect the right information and you make sure that your strategy is correct and you're going in the right way and you're then chasing the right opportunities and you're not necessarily spending as much time on the things that don't work as well. So your content becomes really strong, your offerings become really strong, and it drives the results that you're looking for as an organization. And finally, advertising costs. Advertising is so huge for reaching people. And there are other things that we can do similar to advertising, like customer advocacy, which could be huge. And so, for example, it's, in a lot of cases, and this won't necessarily work for all departments, but there are some departments where we can really, really showcase the success that our members have. And that'll get their friends excited, that'll get their families excited, and it becomes a great complement to advertising as we try to get our our story out there and our message out there so we can drive what it is we want to drive. So if we think about the efficiency side, and this is where we're going to start getting into a few formulas and all that fun stuff. Now, if you have an efficient social media program and you've got the right tools and the right processes, you can actually save up to 65% of the time that you are currently spending on social media. And so what happens is if we build out this formula, we could look at if we spend 65% of this time, then we are saving based on a team of X. So say we've got a team of 5 people. We've got a team of 5 people. We're saving 65% of their time. We're saving 65, 0.65 times X. That's how many hours we're saving annually. And then what is the value from that? What can those people now do that is different? What other missions can we give them because they're not spending as much time in the day-to-day of social media marketing? So the efficiency part can be really huge. That could be a big value add, And there's a lot of really cost-effective tools out there, and you'll have access to great tools today that'll help you do that and help you achieve what it is you need to achieve with the resources that you have. There's also again, with the power of measurement, when we really understand the performance that we have, we can actually get an increase of 200% in website traffic. So if we think about that model that we talked about earlier, that funnel model, when we've built out that model in a great way, and now we're using it to analyze the posts that we have and analyze the stuff that we're sending out, the changes that we make from that, we have seen can have up to a 200% increase in website traffic. So if we could tweak the content that we're putting out there based on the metrics that we're now pulling, that'll give us a huge increase. And then again, it's going to vary by business, and that's why we have it as an X here. But the value of increased web traffic is going to change from department to department, and then that gives us, at the end of the day, a dollar value. Now, I fully understand. Just so I'm crystal clear, I fully understand that in the nature of y'all's day-to-day and in the nature of your missions out there, not everything is dollar value related, right? There are a lot of things that are about keeping people safe and informing people. This is a model to help us quantify these things. And, we're all capitalists here. And right now, dollars are the best way to do that. But 100% understand that it might not be a pure dollar thing from your department, but it's still a great way for us to be able to measure what that is. So please feel free when you look at these formulas, not only just to change the X, but also change what it is we're measuring to make it apply to your department. So when you're having discussions with your colleagues and your peers and your superiors, it's the language that they speak. Now, ads is a big piece, and ads, we see a ton of return on ads in general from social. So there's huge efficiency gains to be had by making sure you've got the right ads tools and the right ad skill set. You can save up to half the time, which again could be huge from an efficiency perspective. But the other thing as well is when we've got a really good measurement program in place, then what we have seen is that the people who are measuring the right types of data and who have the right types of tools for ads, up to a 15% reduction in ad spend. And that can be huge depending on what is the ad spend for your department. So the ad performance goes up, which is great. And then we need to spend less money, which is amazing. So advocacy, and again, this will depend on what information you can share. But advocacy, we have seen as just such a great way to reach other departments. So advocacy in this sense is, say for example, y'all do this every day in some of the great content that you've got out there, looking at some of the social networks, some of the great testimonials you have from people who now have great careers, some of the great highlights of people who've done amazing work. But really what advocacy is advocacy is a way for you to really take advantage of everyone in the organization to share content out. So giving them the ability to share out some of these great stories to their personal social networks. So if we think about a situation where we're trying to fight misinformation, and we're trying to fight misinformation at the departmental level, when we empower our front line to also fight that misinformation by packaging up those areas of information that we want them to share out, that has huge impact because it reaches their friends, it reaches their family, and it's got that instant trust when they see it from those people. So I am very likely, extremely likely to trust something my government sends out, but if that's also reinforced by something that my trusted friends or family group is sending out, that reinforces it even more and makes it even more powerful. So it actually could be a really great way for us to show some of the impact on social media. And again, if we're trying to drive people towards something, sometimes having things sent out by our trusted peer group or our trusted family group is even more effective than from a trusted organization like some of our government departments. Now, if we think about brand health, right? So this is, again, maybe a hard one to quantify in dollars for some of the things that we do, but in general, how is it that people feel about my organization? How do people feel about DINFOS? How do people feel about the Coast Guard? Now, being able to listen effectively to some of the content that's coming in, and some of that listening can be done with tools, some of that listening can be done natively through the social networks, but you can really start to see what type of brand mentions you have, and we can see what we can do, what kind of content we can put out there to increase that positive sentiment. And there's some ways to quantify it. Now, crisis management, I think that's the name of the game sometimes for what it is that y'all do, and it's really important. And making sure that you've got a really efficient way to communicate with other departments as needed, and leverage their social networks and leverage their people to make sure that in times of crisis, that right information is getting out there so people are staying safe. That could be really, really important, and it can help get ahead of crises as they happen. Now, there's also there's a brand reputation aspect of this as well, and that's why one of the great things about social media is it's easy for people to post, right? It's easy for people to get out there. And so one things we want to make sure is if we have the right processes and systems in place, we can actually keep an eye on what some people are posting. And sometimes, in general, we found that there's a 10% probability of people posting something inappropriate to social media. So who within our rank and file are giving our organizations a bad name by posting inappropriate things? There's ways for us to protect against that. There's ways for us to analyze that and report on that and make sure that we're catching that so that it doesn't impact how people feel about our organization or our group. So what should we do at the end of the day, right? What should our call to action be? So I think it's really important for us to think about all the different groups and departments that we have and what it is we want to do, and talk about why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we posting this information? What is our objective? What are our leaders looking to do? So why are we doing what we're doing? I think we got to get really clear on that. We got to get really clear on who our audience is. Once we know why we're doing what we're doing, what is actually worth measuring? Right? So of all those different things that we have, what should we actually measure? We've got hundreds of different things that we can pick from. What are the top 3 to 5 per bucket that is really worth measuring to make sure that we're driving in the right direction? And then how should we do that? How should we actually measure these things? Who should we share that information with? That's something we need to answer as well. And then finally, once we do that, if we can quantify the impact along the bottom, then we've got a solid framework for analysis that is quantified that we can then share with our peers, with our colleagues, with our superiors to make sure that we're getting the resources that we need so that we can achieve our mission and that we can measure against the success of what social media is doing to achieve that mission. So I'd love to encourage all of y'all to apply this framework and apply that KPI measurement framework to what it is y'all are doing. And hopefully that'll help y'all test things out. Hopefully it'll help y'all make the best decisions. Hopefully that'll help y'all prove the impact of what y'all are doing day to day, which is huge. So with that, let's go to Q&A.
All right, guys, do we have any questions in the studio? If so, please step to the mic so our presenter can hear you.
Hi, I'm Bethany Crouch from Defense Information Systems Agency. I just wanted to get your take on social listening and measurement for sentiment.
Yep. Yeah. Hi, Bethany. Thanks for the question. So social listening for sentiment, I think social listening in general is huge. Social listening is such a gold mine of what people are saying out there. And I think sentiment is the best indicator within it. It's not a perfect indicator. Sentiment will never be perfect because of the nuances of the English language, but it is such a great way to understand how people feel. And one thing I'd also recommend is that sentiment can be like one bad news story, and sentiment can change in a big way. But I think sentiment is such a great thing to track over time because that gets rid of the big, the big spikes and the big dips and gives you an idea in general of how people are feeling about your department over time or how people are feeling about a certain issue over time. And hopefully that helps you, that helps policymakers or whoever needs to make decisions on that.
Any other studio questions? No?
Hi, Major Gibson from 15th Air Force. So we're kind of taught in PATC, knowledge, attitude, behavior is what we're supposed to be affecting. Do you have any tools on how we can better measure knowledge, attitude, and behaviors? So I think what happens is that's very subjective, which is why a lot of organizations use the number of likes to measure their effectiveness. So do you have any specific tools on how to?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't hear the question at all, unfortunately.
Oh, wait, we're changing mics.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, loud and clear.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, fantastic.
Major Gibson, 15th Air Force. So we're taught in our school that knowledge, attitude, and behavior is what we're trying to affect as a government public affairs organization. However, KAB seems to be very subjective. So do you have any specific tools that will help us be able to really measure how well we are actually affecting or changing knowledge, attitude, or behaviors of our target audiences?
Knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors. I love that. I think that's awesome. I think KAB is such a great acronym, and it is interesting. And that's why I think something like the framework that we use is really great for measuring it might almost be like, do we put knowledge, attitude, and behaviors as part of those funnels, right? So right now we've got the three different ones that we have. Maybe it should be knowledge, attitude, and behaviors. And if we think about it, inform, part of that could be knowledge. If we think about actually interacting with people, having conversations with them, potentially attitude, and then actually driving conversions and the value that we want, that could potentially be behavior. And it's going to be, I think there are models that we can build for this. I think we'll need to look at what metrics we have. So for example, if we want to measure knowledge, we can measure if our information is getting out there. If we want to mention attitude, we can measure sentiment, as we just talked about in the listening question. And if we want to measure behaviors, we can measure it from a conversion perspective, but there's other behaviors that are tough to measure. And I think it's a great question. And I think there are some things that we can do. Will it ever be 100% perfect? I don't believe so, because we're trying to fit measurement into this great abstract framework. But I definitely think that we can get down that path, and we can build a model that even if we can't measure behavior 100%, we can at least get some really good ideas of behavior and then get a good idea if we're driving behavior in the way, if it's trending upwards or trending downwards. Thank you for the thought-provoking question. That was really good. And knowledge, attitude, and behavior. I like that.
Any other questions from our audience in the studio? Check online. Anything else, guys? Well, Amin, I appreciate your time, brother. I appreciate the knowledge that you've given us. And thanks for tuning in for us, from our audience. Oh, if you got any parting words, Amin, you're welcome to share those with us now.
Yeah, so thank you all so much. I hope you all enjoyed this session. Thank you all for everything that you do every day. It's obviously super important, and you're keeping a whole lot of people safe. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity. And it was a pleasure speaking to you today.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. All right, guys, and with that, that ends our day one session. Unless you guys have any other questions, comments, concerns about anything. It doesn't appear to be. Everybody's itching to get out of here. I get it. It's a little later than 16:30. So be back tomorrow. Tune in tomorrow. Absolutely. We'll do another exciting speakers tomorrow. We'll be talking about research a little bit and how we stay relevant in these ever-changing environments. We're going to have a podcaster here talking about podcasts and some great information about disinformation, misinformation. So look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. And with that being said, I think we are done for today. Thanks for tuning in.